You ever watch someone try to bury you in front of a crowd, only to realize they just dug their own grave? That's exactly what happened when my ex tried to ruin my reputation in front of her new boyfriend. She wanted to look like the victim, the one who escaped me, the toxic guy she was oh so brave to leave behind. I just stood there, every nerve in my body telling me to lash out, but I didn't. What happened next? Well, let's just say her performance didn't land the way she expected. Before all of this, we were just another couple who thought we had it figured out. We met in college, bonded over music, long drives, and the kind of late-night talks that make you believe you found your person. For a while, it felt like I had. She was charming, quick with a comeback, and always the center of attention. Honestly, I kind of liked that about her, until I realized she also liked being the center of attention at my expense. The relationship was rocky, but not in the obvious ways. No screaming matches, no dramatic cheating scandals I knew of at the time. It was quieter than that. Little digs slipped into conversations. Subtle shifts in tone that left me second-guessing myself. She'd tell stories where she looked like the star, and I looked like the clueless sidekick. People laughed, and I laughed too, because what else could I do? Call it insecurity, call it naivety. I let it slide. When we broke up, it wasn't some explosive ending. More like a slow unraveling that everyone else seemed to see coming but me. She framed it as her needing space, her finding herself. I took it at face value, even wished her well. But apparently, I didn't play my assigned role correctly. I wasn't devastated enough, wasn't desperate enough, didn't fall apart in the way she could point to and say, "See, he can't live without me." And that's when the shift really happened. Suddenly, she wasn't just moving on, she was rewriting our history. Things I thought were mutual decisions became, in her retelling, evidence of my failures. Moments where I had supported her transformed into stories about how I had held her back. At first, I shrugged it off. I figured people would see through it. After all, the truth doesn't need defending, right? Except the truth doesn't shout. Lies do. And she shouted hers loud enough that they started to stick. The first time I ran into her with her new boyfriend, I honestly thought it would be nothing more than polite small talk and awkward goodbyes. I underestimated her. She treated that moment like a stage, and me like the villain in her one-woman show. It wasn't just about making me look bad. It was about proving to him, and maybe to herself, that she'd traded up. I remember standing there, watching her twist old stories into barbs, each one aimed to get a laugh at my expense. My chest felt tight, my jaw locked, but I forced myself to stay calm. Because as much as she wanted this to be her triumph, I had a feeling the audience wasn't buying it. And I had no idea just how far she was willing to go, or how spectacularly it would backfire. It started at a birthday party for a mutual friend. Neutral territory, or so I thought. I almost didn't go. There's always that awkward calculus when you know your ex might be there. But my friend insisted, and I figured enough time had passed. We could be adults about it. The moment I walked in, I felt her presence before I saw her. She had that laugh, sharp and loud, the kind that cuts through any room. When I finally spotted her, she was draped around her new boyfriend like a trophy she wanted everyone to see. And when her eyes landed on me, something flickered, triumph, maybe. The kind of look you give when you've been rehearsing a scene and finally get to perform it. At first, it was small things. She'd drop my name into conversations with little digs. "Oh, he never used to dress like that," she'd say with a smirk, loud enough for me to hear. Or, "He was always so indecisive, remember?" Everyone laughed, including her boyfriend, who seemed to eat it up. I clenched my jaw, told myself it wasn't worth reacting. People see through this, I thought. Just let it slide. But then came the story. The one she'd clearly been saving. We were standing in a circle, me, her boyfriend, a couple of old friends. And she launches into this tale about how I lost it one night when we got stranded on the highway. In her version, I was a panicked mess, yelling, blaming her for not filling the tank. She painted herself as the calm, capable one who called roadside assistance while I supposedly sat in the car, pouting like a child. Everyone chuckled. Her boyfriend laughed the loudest. Except here's the thing, it never happened. Not like that. Yes, the car broke down. Yes, I was frustrated. But I was the one who called for help, the one who kept her calm while she cried. She'd flipped the story, stripped me of my dignity, and handed it to herself as a punchline. And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just telling stories. She was auditioning. auditioning for her new boyfriend, for our mutual friends, maybe even for herself. Every exaggeration, every twist of the truth was designed to cast her as the heroine who survived me. My chest tightened. My ears buzzed. I could feel the heat climbing my neck, that rush of anger and shame colliding. Every part of me wanted to correct her, to snap, to tell the real story. But I froze. My mind raced. If I defend myself, I look defensive. If I laugh, I validate the lie. If I walk away, I look guilty. So I just stood there, forcing a smile, while my insides twisted. And that's when I caught it, the look on one friend's face. Not a laugh, not a smirk, more like a wince. Like they knew she was stretching the truth too thin. That tiny detail, that flicker of recognition, kept me standing. Because maybe I wasn't as alone in this as I felt. But I had no idea how much further she was willing to push it and how public her performance was about to become. The party rolled on, but I couldn't shake that tight knot in my stomach. Every time she laughed a little too loud or leaned into her boyfriend's shoulder while tossing another jab my way, I felt the sting. But I also started noticing the cracks. It wasn't big, obvious things at first. More like little shifts in body language. A friend I'd known since freshman year wouldn't quite meet my eyes during her stories. Another gave this quick, nervous laugh, then looked down into his drink. The kind of reactions you catch when people don't want to be part of someone else's show, but also don't want to cause a scene. Then it happened again. She spun another story. This one about how I'd supposedly embarrassed her at a dinner with her parents. In her telling, I'd made some joke that fell flat, then doubled down until the whole evening was ruined. She mimicked me, exaggerating my voice like I was some clueless clown. Her boyfriend laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. But across the circle, my friend Sarah raised her eyebrows. She wasn't smiling. Just this tiny flicker, like really? That's how it happened? My pulse quickened. Sarah had been there that night. She knew it hadn't gone down like that. In fact, if anyone had been out of line, it was her, snapping at her dad, then storming out when he questioned her about her career plans. I had been the one trying to smooth things over. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't crazy. She was rewriting history, bending it to her script. And at least some people in the room remembered the real version. Still, doubt gnawed at me. What if I was misreading their looks? What if they were just being polite? What if, despite the truth, her performance was winning? I ducked out to the kitchen, needing a breather. Grabbed a drink I didn't want, just something to keep my hands busy. That's when another friend, Tom, drifted over. He gave me this half smile, awkward but knowing. "Man," he muttered, keeping his voice low. "She's really going in tonight, huh?" I froze. My heart thudded. So it wasn't just me. Tom shrugged, sipping his beer. "Don't worry about it. People can see what she's doing. It's kind of obvious." That one sentence hit harder than anything else all night. Relief, anger, vindication, all tangled together. Because yeah, it was obvious. But it was also humiliating. Standing there, the subject of her one-woman roast, while she tried to polish her image in front of her new guy. I thanked Tom, but inside, something shifted. The shame didn't sting as sharply anymore. Because if people could see through her act, even a little, then maybe I didn't have to fight back in that moment. Maybe the truth had more gravity than her theatrics. I walked back into the living room, forcing myself to stay calm, to watch instead of react. And sure enough, she was at it again, louder now, feeding off the attention. But this time, I noticed more than just her voice. I saw the way her boyfriend looked at her. Eyes lit up, hanging on every word, but also the way everyone else seemed quieter, less engaged, like they were indulging her, not entertained by her. It was a subtle shift, but it planted a seed in me. Because if she kept pushing, I had a feeling her performance wasn't just going to fall flat, it was going to collapse on her. And I didn't have to lift a finger. If scene 1 was the slap and scene 2 was the sting, this was the moment the bruise bloomed in full view. The party had hit that stage where people cluster into smaller groups, kitchen talkers, patio smokers, couch crashers. I was on the edge of a circle, nursing a drink, trying to blend into the wallpaper. That's when she decided to go all in. It started innocently enough. Someone brought up a road trip we'd all taken years ago, a weekend at the lake house. People laughed about the cramped car, the broken AIC, the mosquitoes. But she twisted it into another performance. "Oh my God," she said, putting her hand dramatically on her boyfriend's arm. "You should have seen him that weekend. Total meltdown. He forgot the directions, Nearly got us lost 3 times, and when the car broke down, he just sat there sulking while I figured it all out. Classic him. Always panicking, never reliable. She minded me pacing around, exaggerating my voice into a whiny caricature. The group chuckled politely. Her boyfriend roared. But then, something shifted. From across the room, Sarah's voice cut in. Not loud, not confrontational. Just steady. That's not how I remember it, she said. The air tightened. Everyone froze, like someone had hit pause. Sarah continued, calm but clear. He was the one who fixed the car. You were upset. Actually, you cried, remember? He calmed you down. You don't remember that. My ex blinked. Just for a second, her mask slipped. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted, searching for footing. And then came the overcompensation. Well, sure, if that's how you saw it, she said, her laugh brittle. But from where I was sitting, he was totally useless. I mean, come on, you know how he is. But the damage was done. The room felt different now. Not everyone jumped to laugh. Not everyone nodded along. There was a ripple of doubt, small but visible. I felt it too. My pulse slowed, my chest loosened. For the first time all night, I wasn't just the punchline. Someone else had spoken the truth out loud, and it cracked her script in half. She must have sensed it, because she pushed harder, launched into another story. This one about how I supposedly embarrassed her at a friend's wedding. How I drank too much and made a scene. She embellished details, describing me slurring words I never said, dancing in ways I never danced. Her boyfriend laughed so hard he slapped his knee. And then, Tom, the same guy who'd pulled me aside earlier, raised an eyebrow. Funny, he said, voice even, because I was at that wedding. And if I remember right, you were the one who got sick in the bathroom. He actually helped cover for you. Dead silence. She froze again. Her laugh came out too sharp, too forced. Oh, come on, you're exaggerating. Everyone knows he couldn't handle parties like that. But the silence lingered. And in that silence, something clicked inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. She had been rewriting every memory, flipping the script, making me the fool so she could look strong. And people weren't just noticing, they were correcting her. My hands shook, but not from shame this time. From adrenaline. From relief. From the realization that the truth had allies, and it didn't need me to shout to be heard. I looked around the circle. No one was laughing anymore, not the way they had at first. Some were fidgeting, some avoided eye contact, but the spell was broken. And her boyfriend? He looked uncomfortable, not furious, not ready to leave her, but unsettled. Like the story he'd been sold didn't quite fit the packaging anymore. That was when I knew this wasn't just a bad night. This was confirmation. She wasn't simply shading me in private conversations or subtle comments. She was actively performing lies, trying to rewrite me in front of everyone. And now, with people challenging her, the cracks in her performance were spreading. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because sometimes the loudest defense is silence, when the truth starts speaking through other people's mouths. But the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She wasn't done. And the next move she made would drag the entire party into her unraveling. The thing about lies is that they get heavier the more you stack them. By the time the night stretched toward midnight, she was carrying a tower ready to topple, and I got a front row seat to watch it wobble. I'd retreated to the patio, thinking I could slip under the radar for the rest of the night. But she followed, dragging her boyfriend and a couple others with her. It was as if my presence was the oxygen her performance needed. Without me, there was no show. She leaned against the railing, drink in hand, and smiled that tight, rehearsed smile. You know, she said to the group, he always had this way of making everything about him. Couldn't stand when I got attention. It's why we never worked. He was threatened by me being the smarter one. That word, threatened, hit like a dart. It wasn't just a jab anymore. It was character assassination. And she said it with such confidence, like she'd practiced in the mirror. But then came the kicker. She looked right at her boyfriend, lowered her voice into something conspiratorial, and added, honestly, sometimes I think he was jealous of you even before we met. The air thinned. People shifted uncomfortably. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just rewriting old stories anymore. She was actively tying me to him, making it sound like I'd been some obsessed shadow hovering around her life. I could see her boyfriend's reaction, a smirk, but not as bright as before. More forced, like he wanted to believe her, but the edges didn't fit. And then Sarah, again, spoke up. Funny, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Because if I remember right, he was the one pushing you to take that promotion. He literally said, "Don't let anyone dim your spotlight." Jealous doesn't sound like the word I'd use. My ex froze, blinked, then gave that brittle laugh again. "Oh, Sarah, you always see the best in people. You don't know what it was really like behind closed doors." That line, "behind closed doors," was her shield. The trump card she used whenever she felt cornered. It was unprovable, untouchable, conveniently hidden where no one could challenge it. Except the problem was, she'd been playing that card too often, and people were starting to notice. Tom cleared his throat. "Look, maybe this isn't the time," he muttered. Not exactly defending me, but it was a crack in her rhythm. I didn't speak. My heart pounded, but I knew better now. She wanted me to explode, to lash out, to give her proof of the villain she was selling. But I stayed quiet, letting her words echo in the heavy silence. And in that silence, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about me. This was who she was. She needed to be the hero of every story, even if it meant fabricating villains. She'd do it to me, to anyone, as long as it fed the image she craved. The revelation sank deep. Our breakup wasn't an ending. It was an escape. Still, I knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't finished. Not tonight. And the next escalation would push everything over the edge, taking her carefully curated reputation with it. I stepped back from the circle, pretending to check my phone, but really I was checking myself. My pulse was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. Every nerve screamed at me to say something, to finally set the record straight, to strip her lies bare in front of everyone the way she'd been trying to strip me. The lines played in my head like rehearsed speeches. "That never happened. You're lying. Ask anyone here. They know the truth." I pictured myself unloading every receipt, every contradiction, every moment I'd swallowed in silence. The satisfaction of finally snapping back burned hot in my chest. But then came the doubt. What if I looked petty? What if defending myself just made me sound guilty? What if raising my voice was exactly what she wanted, to point and say, "See, look how unstable he is"? I remembered the way Sarah and Tom had spoken up earlier. Calm, grounded, credible. Their voices had carried more weight than mine could have in that moment, precisely because they hadn't been the target. If I lashed out now, I'd risk flipping the script back in her favor. The war inside me raged. Anger versus patience, justice versus strategy. I barely tasted the drink in my hand, but I gripped it like an anchor. I told myself to breathe, to wait, to let her dig deeper. Every lie was another shovel full of dirt she was throwing on her own stage. Still, lying awake later that night, I knew silence wasn't enough. I couldn't let her keep rewriting me. Not forever. And so, in those sleepless hours, a plan began to form, not fueled by rage, but by precision. If she wanted an audience, I'd let her have one. But it wouldn't be the show she expected. I didn't know it yet, but my choice to hold back in that moment, to wait instead of explode, was the very thing that would turn the tables in ways she couldn't control. Because patience, I realized, is its own kind of weapon. A week passed, but the party stuck with me like a splinter. Every replay in my head made my jaw clench tighter. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Silence had bought me time, but it wasn't a solution. If I left her unchecked, she'd keep performing the same script until it calcified into truth. So I made my first move. It wasn't dramatic. No confrontations, no public explosions. Just quiet conversations. The kind that happen over coffee, in text threads, or on short walks after class. I reached out to a few mutual friends, the ones who had been there that night. Sarah, Tom, even a couple who hadn't spoken up, but had worn those looks of doubt. I didn't launch into accusations. Instead, I asked questions. Hey, did that story sound right to you? Was that really how you remembered it? What surprised me was how quickly they nodded, almost relieved, like they'd been waiting for someone to ask. Sarah was blunt. She twists everything. It's like she needs to look perfect, even if it means trashing you. Tom added, people notice, man. You're not crazy. Just don't give her ammo. That's what she wants. Their words steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't standing alone in the storm. There was a small but solid ground under my feet. But I didn't stop there. I knew she was rewriting the past. I needed to anchor the truth. So I started pulling receipts, not in some obsessive way, but carefully. Old text threads, messages, photos. Little details that showed how events had really gone. Proof that I hadn't been the caricature she was selling. It wasn't about blasting them out or starting a smear campaign. It was about preparation, about having something to lean on if she pushed me again in public. The first test came sooner than I expected. Another mutual friend hosted a dinner. Smaller group, more intimate. And sure enough, she showed up with her boyfriend in tow, smiling like the star of the show. My stomach nodded, but this time I was ready. When she slid into her routine, "Oh, you wouldn't believe how useless he was during." I didn't stay silent. I didn't explode either. I just calmly said, "Actually, that's not how it went. Want me to show you the messages from that night?" The table froze. Her boyfriend looked at me, then at her. She laughed, waved it off. "Oh, come on. You're taking it so seriously." But the laughter around the table was thinner this time. Hollow. For once, I felt a flicker of control. Not victory, not yet, but control. Walking home that night, I thought maybe I'd turn the tide. Maybe by calmly pushing back, by showing proof, I'd stopped her script in its tracks. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because if the first act was her trying to perform at my expense, the next act would be her doubling down and dragging even more people into the fallout. For a little while, it felt like I'd finally shifted the balance. After that dinner, she didn't push as hard. The usual digs were absent, the exaggerated stories quieter, almost hesitant. Mutual friends seemed warmer toward me, more relaxed, like the air had cleared. I let myself believe I'd won. A week passed without incident. 2. I went to gatherings without that knot in my chest. Conversations felt normal again, laughs that weren't edged with suspicion, inside jokes that didn't have me as the punchline. Even her boyfriend, when I crossed paths with him, gave me a polite nod instead of that smug grin. It was tempting to think she'd burned herself out, that the truth had weighed heavier than her stories, and she'd quietly accepted defeat. I remember one night sitting on my couch, scrolling through messages, thinking, maybe it's finally over. Maybe I can just move on. But in hindsight, that was the calm before the storm. Because narcissists don't retreat, they regroup. And what I mistook for silence was just her loading the next round. The confirmation came when another friend texted me out of the blue. "Hey, just so you know, she's been talking again. Not in front of you. Behind your back." My stomach sank. Of course she hadn't stopped. She'd just changed tactics. Instead of putting on a show in front of me, she was rewriting me in private conversations, seeding doubts in quieter ways. No audience to challenge her. No risk of someone like Sarah or Tom cutting in with the truth. The illusion of resolution shattered in a single buzz of my phone. And I realized, if I didn't find a way to end this properly, she'd keep rewriting me forever, until her version was the only one left standing. The false calm was over. The real storm was just about to hit. The text warning me she was talking again stuck in my head like a siren. I tried to brush it off. Rumors, hearsay, maybe even exaggeration. But deep down I knew. People like her don't stop. They adapt. Confirmation came at the worst possible time. Another mutual friend, this time Mark, was hosting a big get-together. Not just the usual small crew, but co-workers, acquaintances, friends of friends. A real mix. I almost skipped it, but Sarah convinced me. "She can't control the whole room," she said. "Just come. You'll see." I should have listened to my gut. The night started fine. Music, drinks, chatter. I was actually enjoying myself, talking to people who had nothing to do with the drama. For the first time in weeks, I felt normal. Then I saw her walk in hand with her boyfriend, chin high, like she owned the place. I told myself to stay cool, keep my distance, let her do her thing. But she had other plans. Within an hour, she had a crowd around her. I could feel the shift in the room, the way laughter spiked at her words, the way heads turned toward me, subtle but sharp. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just recycling the same digs. She had escalated. This time, she was telling a brand new story, fabricated out of thin air. "I don't like to talk about it," she said dramatically. But honestly, there were times I was scared of him. He had this temper. You never knew what might set him off. The words hit me like a brick to the chest. Scared? Temper? That wasn't just embarrassing. It was character assassination. That was planting seeds of something darker. Something that could stain me long after the laughs faded. I saw her boyfriend's arm tighten around her shoulders, his jaw set. I saw strangers, people who didn't know me, look at me with narrowed eyes, already drawing conclusions. And for a moment, I felt it. The bottom dropping out. The fear that maybe this time she'd gone far enough to stick. But then came the pushback. Sarah, bless her, cut through the noise again. Scared, she said flatly. Really? Because I was there for half your fights, and the only one throwing plates wasn't him. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled. Tom added, yeah, I never once saw him lose his temper. Annoyed? Sure. Human. But scared? Come on. I felt heat rise in my face. Not from shame this time, but from sheer gratitude. But my ex doubled down. You guys don't understand. You didn't see what happened behind closed doors. Same shield, same line. Only this time, the audience wasn't nodding along. Mark, the host, stepped in. Okay, that's enough. This isn't the place. His tone was sharp, irritated, not at me, but at her. For the first time all night, she looked rattled. Her boyfriend glanced between us, confusion written across his face. He hadn't signed up for this kind of tension, and I realized something important. She had overplayed her hand. In a room where not everyone knew me, her lies might have taken root, if not for the people who did know me. Their corrections, their quick defense, cracked her story wide open in real time. The stakes had spiked, but so had the resistance. I stayed silent, even as adrenaline surged through me. My hands shook around my glass, my teeth clenched, but I didn't need to add a word. The contrast was loud enough, her desperate exaggerations versus their steady pushback. Still, the damage wasn't undone. Not yet. I could feel it in the stares of strangers who didn't know which side to believe. Seeds, once planted, don't disappear overnight. Walking home later, my mind spun. Relief that I hadn't been alone. Fear that her words might linger anyway. Rage that she'd crossed the line from mockery to accusation. That night I understood. I couldn't just defend myself reactively. I had to end this. Not with yelling, not with chaos, but with something undeniable. Because if I didn't, the next story she told could stick for good. And that was something I couldn't afford. I wish I could say I walked away from that night feeling vindicated. That Sarah and Tom speaking up, that Mark shutting her down, was enough to steady me. But the truth? The walk home was one of the loneliest of my life. The city lights blurred as I replayed every word she'd said. Temper. Scared of him. Behind closed doors. That wasn't just her being petty anymore. Those were loaded words, the kind that stick like tar. The kind that can stain a reputation permanently if they land in the wrong ears. And what haunted me most was the silence of the people who didn't know me. The ones who'd glanced at me sideways, unsure what to believe. I couldn't control what they carried home, what they might repeat later. A seed planted, even in doubt, is still a seed. By the time I collapsed onto my couch, I felt hollow. The anger had burned out, leaving only exhaustion and dread. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if maybe she'd already won. Maybe no matter what I did, her version of me would spread wider, faster. Lies are quick. Truth takes time. And maybe I didn't have enough time to outrun hers. Sleep didn't come. My mind spiraled into worst-case scenarios. What if her boyfriend believed her completely? What if he spread her stories to his circle, who'd spread it to theirs? What if I became that guy, the one whispered about, avoided, judged by people who never even met me? I thought about confronting her, about showing up at her door, demanding she stop. But the image of her spinning that into yet another story, a story of me harassing her, of me proving her point, froze me in place. For the first time, I questioned myself deeply. Not just what if they believe her, but what if I really am what she says? I replayed every argument, every raised voice, every frustrated sigh, scrutinizing them through her lens. Was I harsher than I remembered? Was I blind to my own flaws? That thought gutted me more than anything she said. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, the villain she painted wasn't completely imaginary. And yet, a quieter voice whispered back, no, you know who you are. You know what really happened. But in that moment, the quieter voice felt fragile against the storm in my head. I lay there until dawn, the weight of it pressing on my chest. And it was in that gray, sleepless haze that I finally realized something. I couldn't wait for someone else to defend me. I couldn't rely on silence, on patience, on hoping people would just see through her act. If I wanted this to end, I had to take the wheel myself. Not with rage, not with pleading, with something she couldn't twist, couldn't perform her way out of. It was time to end her show, once and for all. When the next gathering came around, I knew it wasn't chance, it was inevitability. Our circles overlapped too much, and as long as she kept performing, I'd keep being cast as her villain. But this time, I wasn't walking in unarmed. I'd spent the days since that sleepless night gathering every thread of truth I could weave into armor. Screenshots of messages where I'd encouraged her, supported her, picked her up when she was down. Photos from trips where the meltdowns she claimed were nothing more than us laughing in the car. Notes from friends, Sarah and Tom especially, who were ready to back me if things turned ugly. I didn't plan to start anything, but if she came for me again, I'd be ready. And of course, she did. It was almost scripted. She found a way to turn the spotlight on herself, dragging me into the shadows as contrast. A story about how I'd controlled her, kept her from chasing opportunities. She gestured with wide arms, her boyfriend nodding along dutifully. But this time, before the laughter could ripple, I spoke. Calm, clear, no heat in my tone, no bite in my words. Funny, I said, because I've still got the messages where I told you to take that promotion. Want me to show everyone? The room stilled. Eyes flicked between us. Her smile faltered. You're twisting it, she snapped, voice sharper than she intended. I shrugged. Am I? Because I also have the texts from the night of the lake house, the ones where you thanked me for fixing the car, and the ones from the wedding, where you admitted you'd been the one drinking too much. Should I pull them up? Her face flushed. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked. You're really going to start digging through old messages? That's pathetic. But the crowd wasn't with her anymore. Sarah spoke up. It's not pathetic. It's proof. Tom added. We were there. We remember. He's not making this up. Her boyfriend's eyes darted, searching her face. Doubt was written all over him now. And then the moment tipped. She lashed out. Not at me, but at them. Of course you'd all take his side. You've always babied him, always acted like he's some saint. You don't know what he's really like. But her voice cracked on the last word, and the silence that followed wasn't sympathy. It was recoil. People shifted in their seats, uncomfortable, realizing they weren't watching her strength. They were watching her spiral. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just said, if you have to rewrite the past to make yourself look better, maybe the problem isn't me. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Her boyfriend stood, muttering something about needing air, and walked out. She called after him, but he didn't turn back. The room was frozen, every eye on her. For once, she didn't have a line to deliver. No punchline, no villain to point at. Just silence. I sat there, heart pounding, not triumphant but steady. The performance was over, and everyone knew it.